Next, we're going to explore adding more depth to the scene with some large middle ground and foreground sprites. So let's get started on that. So we're going to import a new texture. Do source import. We'll grab, for this one we're actually going to, the midground we're going to use city background again. We're just going to change the brightness on this as well and the distance away from the camera. So we'll grab this. No, okay, that's right. It's already imported. So, okay, we'll copy it this way. We'll just drag it off here and actually let me right click and do duplicate. And it says city background too, but we'll call it city midground. Okay, we'll double click this and we'll apply brightness setting on this. Let's try 2. I'll have to play with this a little bit. Okay, city midground. Let's do sprite actions. Let's extract a sprite from this as well. City midground _0 will be the name. We'll extract this. I'll drag this off to our environment sprites. And we'll drag it into the world. I'm going to scale this as well. I'll move this back behind our playable area, but not quite as far as the other one. Let's see. Move it back. Let's move it back to about -800. There we go. We're going to scale this up a little too, not quite as large as the other ones, but still a little bit. And there we go, by a power of 3. And let's move it behind our playable area. And right about there. And then let's move it down so we actually see the silhouette of the skyline behind our playable area. And we'll do about there. We'll take a quick peek at how this is looking. Okay, yeah, we're going to have to lighten up the middle ground because these are actually the same value right now. So let's look at our source again, back to our textures. Our middle ground brightness is 2. So yeah, we are going to have to lighten the city background to 3 to make that show up a little bit differently. And that's not too bad. Let's check the brightness of our sky. Maybe that'll affect this a little bit. Move it to 2. It's looking a little better. There we go. Now we're seeing more depth. It's looking better already. Makes it look like there's some depth to the ruined cityscape behind it. But we're not, as you can see to the left of my character, we're not tiling properly. So we'll just duplicate this. I'll go to front view again so I can align up on the grid. I'll nudge it over with the arrow keys till it's aligned. There we go. So if I hit play, there we go. Now it looks more like there's a continuous cityscape behind me. So the final touch here is to include a foreground. So we're going to go again, we're going to import one more time. Go to our source folder, import the city foreground PNG. And for this, let's see if the brightness, it's at 1, that should be okay. It's kind of dark. We want this to be darker, almost so there's a dark silhouette in the foreground, and it'll be very large in the view of the camera. So I'm going to extract a sprite again from this, but first I'll apply Paper 2D texture settings to get the transparency we want. And now I will extract my sprite. We'll just call it City Foreground. No special sprite name. And there we go. We'll drag this to the environment folder. Move it there, and the city foreground will drag into the world. And we're not going to scale this as much as the other ones, but we will scale it a little bit vertically. That should look a little bit better. I want to put this in front of the playable area, but it's tricky here. You don't want to actually obscure the gameplay, but you just want a little bit of a hint of their stuff being stuff in front of the camera, but also in front of the player. So here we'll do, let me see, it's almost right, but yeah, that's pretty good there. And we'll move this a little bit down and a little bit. Actually, okay, we'll start this one way over here. And the next one will tile, so I'll drag it this way. And I'll go to front view again. And in front view, I can see that these are not quite aligned. So I'll use the arrow keys and just nudge them back together. If we look in perspective, we can see there's many levels of depth here. And lastly, I will drag another one off this way and switch to front view again to align the two sprites together. Okay, and I'll hit play and see how this looks. Okay, we can see a little bit. Yeah, now we can see stuff in the foreground, so it looks like there's ruined structures between the camera and the area the player's walking in. This gives us a pretty good sense of depth across the level. Yeah, that's working out as we want. So there we go. There's a pretty simple way of creating depth using your camera set to perspective instead of an actual orthographic camera. To review this module, we looked at the environmental tile sprite sheet, and we examined the layout of the sprite sheet with the environmental tiles and the variety of structures and materials that can be represented in it. We looked at editing the sprite collision and source regions of each sprite. That gave us the ability to refine the collision contours of each sprite for greater accuracy, and how to adjust the source regions of each sprite to combine the separate tiles into one sprite. We looked at duplicating sprite tile actors for level geometry. We used quick cloning, stacking, and the aligning of the sprite tiles with collision to create a variety of playable space. We looked at creating the back, the mid, and the foreground using large sprites. And we used placement of the large sprites with a perspective camera and some subtle color shifting to create the illusion of greater depth. We looked at integrating a large sprite vista into the playable space. And we did this by aligning the large building sprites to not occlude the playable space, but to use it as a framing visual instead.